Welcome everyone, Questini here with a discussion about Kislev in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires and why currently in the game they are fairly unworkable on the campaign map. Now it's not like Kislev has a really horrible roster, in point of fact they have a pretty good roster. They could use artillery at tier 2, tier 3 in order to deal with sieges better, but outside of that Kislev is actually in a fairly good situation from a roster perspective as a race. It is just everything else in a Kislev campaign that does bring them down. Their Legendary Lords, well, Katrin is one of the most useless Legendary Lords in the entire game. If she had both Ice and Frost magic, like Manfred does for instance, she would actually be more useful if you had that particular choice, or a combination of spells, of the most powerful spells from both Frost and Ice magic, she would actually be more useful. Also, her quest battle is pretty annoying to actually get one of her items. So not really a great situation with Katrin. Kastaltin, Boris, and Astankia are in a better position as Legendary Lords, like the Ward Save for Embedded Patriarchs, the Leadership and Melee Attack benefit for Kossars is useful in Kastaltin's campaign. I would certainly trade all that away for a range benefit, don't get me wrong on that. But still, the other Legendary Lords are in a better position in terms of their faction effects or their Lord effects. But Kislev is still a bad race. And this is seen in every single Kislev campaign, including Astankia's campaign. It's kind of crazy to think of the fact that Creative Assembly released a paid DLC for a race that is pretty bad, and then they did nothing to actually fix the underlying issues of that race. Well, they fixed one issue, if you will, if I'm being generous, but they left a lot of things on the table, so to speak. So what are these issues? Well, let's first start with the economy, the lifeblood of armies in Total War. Well, Kislev's economy is pretty trash. Yes, the special cities do generate a decent amount of income, all the way to 1200, but there's only 3 of them on the entire map. So you can't rely on them for your economy. Besides, even one of these special Kislev cities will not be able to provide you with enough money to support one army, let alone the numerous armies that you will be needing in a Kislev campaign to deal with their foes. It's not like Kislev is lacking in opponents. Oh no, they have plenty of those and to spare as well. Though funnily enough, the large number of opponents is actually the one thing that keeps you going when you are playing a Kislev campaign. But what are the issues that Kislev is confronted with from an economic standpoint? Well, their baseline economic structures cost 1,000 for 100 income. Yes, you can reduce this cost, but all the same, you're waiting 10 turns to get your money back for this, and that's just the tier 1 structure. 15 turns, 20 turns. It makes for a very slow campaign pace. Climate-wise, at least Kislev is in a decent enough situations, and yes, that does matter from the perspective of your economy, because unsuitable climate means a worse situation for your economy. Although Astankia and Boris are better because they can take the Wastelands, so the entirety of the Darklands, the entirety of Nagaron, good portions of Norsca are available to you to take over. Though unknowingly, dealing with Cast Wasteland is just, well, not that great. Yes, there is a commandment that costs devotion each turn to nullify the Cast Waste's downsides. But this is not exactly a great thing because one, it costs devotion every turn. Regardless though, when you're playing a Kislev campaign, you will certainly have a limited economy one way or another, because that baseline economic structure, while it can be good once you get it to tier 5, that only applies of course for provincial capitals, is still not a great situation to be dealing with. And that tradable resource production plus 50% in a local province, let me give you an idea. The High Elves per Lord get 9% faction-wide for the blue skill line. You having 50% tradable resource production from one structure is not really that great. Especially because you can only start getting it at tier 4, not tier 3, which would be useful. What I would say needs to happen with regards to Kislev's economy is they need this entire building chain to be compressed in 3 tiers and with all the benefits, or perhaps perhaps one of the things that could be done is lower the cost of the market square in half, buff it to 150, all the way to 300, But at tier 3, you get, let's say, 10% tradable resources increased, or even 5%. I'll take that. It would actually be more useful. But let's say 10%, okay? Let's say you get 10% or 15% or however much. Let's say 10% at tier 3. At tier 2, you get 5%. That would make Kislev's economy far more useful. So reduce the cost, increase the income. Not necessarily by a lot. Let's say 50% tier 1, all that. 50% at every tier, and you ultimately would end up with like 300 at tier 3 at a lower cost. Now you could say, well, Kislev does have very cheap recruitment for the farm estate. They do, but cheap recruitment is not really the problem. It's the upkeep of units. In the farm estate, well, the amount of money it's producing is not really going to be all that great. Besides, all these structures, when you're looking at Kislev campaign, they're all fairly expensive. So it's not like, oh, you're building cheap economic buildings that are not producing a lot. No, you're producing expensive economic buildings. Like 50% come from farms. Yeah, look at Bretonia. That's an economy. Kislev's economy is pretty bad because Kislev was designed for Realms of Chaos, where it was designed with a particular pace in mind, like the first 30 turns, fighting a lot of factions with limited economy, then going to the Realms of Chaos, dealing with the negative trait. But that's no longer the case. Besides, Realms of Chaos failed hard, and I think Creative Assembly needs to move away from that particular design. Which they haven't, by the way, like for any campaign. The only reason Cafe is good is because Cafe inherently had the better economy. But of course, that was balanced out by the sheer number of foes that they were dealing with and the severe climate limitations in Realms of Chaos. Because outside of Cafe, you're not conquering a lot of territory unless you teleport to the Empire in Realms of Chaos. That's their issue. But yes, Kislev's economy is just weak, and they have to deal with a lot of foes. The territory of Kislev is pathetic, and thematically, I'm sorry, Kislev doesn't make sense. The best thing you can do in a Kislev campaign is either fight a war on two fronts, holding back the forces of chaos, which I'm doing right here. In fact, I'm about to wipe out the Demon Prince. Holding back the forces of chaos on one hand, while on the other hand, conquering the Empire for economic potential. And that's kind of the problem. You're going to be in this situation as Katrin Kostaltin, where you want to do both of these things at the same time. Hell, even as Boris Ursus. And Astankia, yeah, you want to get to Kislev as quickly as possible because you need at least a military alliance with one of the Kislev factions to unlock their entire unit roster. It's annoying playing as Astankia because you have no patriarchs, which means you have no casualty replenishment, which makes things very, very annoying in her campaign. Like, again, they sold a paid DLC with a crap Legendary Lord who's crap, not because her effects are bad, but because the race inherently is bad and they did nothing to fix that. The territory of Kislev is just not really that great. It's hard to defend any of this territory, and while you certainly can abuse the diplomacy system, that's something anyone can do. So Kislev doesn't get any points. The one benefit Kislev has in the territory of Kislev is between Azazel, Frot, Trog, Wolfric, Archeon, the Demon Prince, maybe even Malice Darkblade. You have a lot of Legendary Lords to be dealing with. Then you add Draika, Azak, Festus, Vlad. Yeah, there's a lot of Legendary Lords. And the benefit of that is whenever you fight a Legendary Lord and defeat him in battle, you actually get quite a bit of money. That's the one thing that keeps Kislev going, but it is a pretty insane campaign pace. But that's not really the problem itself, it's just how little reward there is for it. Now, that's just part of it. The economic equation is just part of it. The other problem, beyond like the research tree really needing some updates, because a lot of it is just honestly fluff. Yes, there is some useful stuff like improved lookouts, lens crafters, all that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of fluff. The Ice Court is meaningless, especially when you use load save character system. So it's like you just play a campaign as play a campaign as Boris Ursus, train a lot of Frost Maiden heroes and Ice Witch Lords, save their traits, disband them, get new ones, or at least get new Frost Maidens, save them again and again. You don't really give a shit about the mechanic because it's just like there's some really good stuff in here, undeniably so, but like the problem is the stuff that's good is so good that stuff that isn't on that level is just meaningless. And it's all RNG. If we could select what we got instead of just having a choice between two potentially crappy decisions, that would be better. So yes, the Ice Court training system needs to take a hike, as far as I see it. It's completely meaningless. I mean, you can use it well with the load save character system, but actually training a lord in a campaign just doesn't really feel all that great. ultimately. Because ultimately, there's just better traits than others. Like, for instance, one of the things you actually want in a campaign very quickly is an Ice Witch with Tempest Magic with infantry focus. That's it. Everything else is meaningless in that respect. Okay, you can get the War Sled benefit for an upkeep benefit, but even so, keep in mind, your economy is still going to be bad even with these Ice Witches. You don't want to bother with Boyars because Boyars are just not going to have those kind of traits. Now you might ask about, well, what about Atamans? Well, what about them? They're not worth using as lords. I'm quite serious on that. They're not worth using to control any armies because while they get some really positive traits, absolutely, and they're basically work as buffed up boyars, they're just better off getting all these traits in a province that they're buffing up economically as opposed to just you putting one of these atamans to control an army. Just a waste of time. Besides, you have severe limitations in terms of Tempest Magic. Not Frost Magic. Frost Magic is not that great, but Tempest Magic, you have severe limitations in terms of that, so you want as many of these Ice Witches with Tempest Magic as possible. The reason you have such severe limitations is because Frost Maidens are very, very limited in terms of their hero capacity. Yes, you can get some from the research tree, but it's not really going to be all that much. Like, you can get up to, let's see, 4 fairly quickly in a campaign. Well, 4, I'm exaggerating, 3 with Frostholm from Erengrad in this particular situation. But beyond that, the problem is, if you want to increase hero capacity, yes, you'll have a lot of Patriarchs, and yes, you'll have a lot of Hag Witches if you want to. But Frost Maidens, yeah, good luck with that, because you need not a tier 4 building, a tier 5 building in order to increase capacity. So actually having magic in your, Tempest Magic in your armies is a bit tricky. You can, again, get a significant number of Hag Witches. That's not really going to be too much of a problem. But actually having a Frost Maidens, like, you'll roll around with a lot of Patriarchs in a campaign. Thankfully, they removed the devotion cost from the churches. That was annoying. Like, they did improve a bit in Kislev's campaign, but the reason they removed the devotion cost is because Estankia doesn't use devotion, which actually is to her downside, believe it or not, because the devotion system is another awful aspect of a Kislev campaign. Let's ignore the supporters for a second, but let's focus on just the devotion system and the invocation. Well, there's one invocation that's just flat out better than everyone else because you have such a crap economy, and that's, of course, Dash. The trade tariff income from all buildings. Like, having an 8% income from all buildings is basically a 10% economic buff faction-wide. You want to use it. Yes, Celiac can give you growth. You don't have growth issues at Kislev. You don't have casualty replenishment issues as Kislev. You don't need necessarily to cause a minimal amount of attrition. By the way, minimal amount of attrition is meaningless because guess what? The AI is very strong against attrition. And the spell here is like nothing in comparison to what Dash has to offer, because if you upgrade Dash with the Eshkol Customs, you're gonna get an elemental bear summon. It doesn't last a lot, but yeah, let's just say Dash blows all the others out of the water. So this system is meaningless in terms of invocation. And devotion is annoying because you can only get it from fighting chaos. What about Skaven, which you'll be fighting? What about greenskins? What about the vampire counts? Oh no. What about the malevolent tree spirit that will literally ally cast in the lore? Yeah, we'll come back. We'll get back to you on that. This is a major issue in a Kislev campaign. Even if we ignore the aspect that a lot of these gods are meaningless, only Dash is really worth it unless you're building supporters, in which case you always go for Urson, which is what I'm doing over here. Even if we ignore that particular aspect, the problem that you do have with the system is that devotion is hard to get. There should be more factions that give devotion. We're talking about minor things. There are mods that give you devotion from all factions. There's a mod, devotion from all factions, which works really, really well. But it's just the problem is, like, you either have a lot of devotion and nothing to spend it on, especially since they removed devotion costs from everything, or you're severely lacking in it. It is good they removed the devotion cost from buildings, but it is not good that those buildings in themselves are still expensive as all hell to get. Like 6,000 for a tier 5 building. Keep in mind, again, construction cost reduction over here with the Woodworkers Guild. One of the things Old World does, by the way, to make Kislev's territory better is they put the special cities in actual provinces. So that way, these construction buildings, these growth buildings, actually are incredibly useful to have. are incredibly useful to have. Sure, they won't generate those tradable resources, which maybe they should. Maybe the grand market should generate that. Trade tariffs, that's all well and good. I'll take 50%. Especially crazy part is all the Kislev cities have tradable resources. And fun fact about those tradable resources, Kislev does produce fur bundles. If you get this entire building chain for Elemental Bear, you would probably only get the fur bundles, really. But it's just like, it's too little too late. The campaign pacing of Immortal Empires just suits more aggressive expansionism and suits building up faster, which Kislev has the growth for it, absolutely, undeniably so, but doesn't have the economic potential for it. Their buildings are expensive. We're talking dwarf expenses over here, and let me say this bluntly, dwarves may have poor post-battle loot, but dwarves get a lot of money from their income, and they have better scalability. They generate more money inherently, they have better scalability, and while they generate very little in terms of post-battle loot, which is a problem, they at least get it done. Kislev, even with Dash, is just pathetic in comparison. All the Warhammer free factions are pathetic in terms of like their scalability in a campaign. Their race is designed for a very limited campaign with limited territory. That's what you need to understand about that. And then let's talk about the supporter system. Ostankia doesn't have to deal with it, Vacre and Gestalten have to do it. And basically, simply because of the supporter system, Vacre and Gestalten are never worth playing a campaign. You want to play a Kislev campaign? In Kislev, play Borsersus. He's a much better campaign. He still has all the economic issues, he still has the invocation issue, he still has the hero capacity issue, but at least you're not dealing with the misery of the supporter system. Let me explain why the supporter system is horrible to deal with. Beyond the fact that you can't confederate the other faction you're fighting with for supporters, which Ostankia and Borsersus don't have to deal with, beyond that aspect which severely limits your campaign potential, the issue is the victory condition. The victory condition for Vacre and Gestalten is to get 600 supporters. A short campaign victory condition, not a long campaign, which would make more sense. If this was 200 or 100, this would actually work. Let's say 200. That would be fairly reasonable. But no, it is 600. So you basically need to win the race in order to get a short campaign victory condition. There are some horrible short campaign victory conditions, including Malekith, Tyrion. So this can apply to really powerful lords. The effects just don't feel worth it. I want to give this comparison to the Troy supporter system, because you did have that race between Paris and Hector. Now, exactly why there is a race between Paris and Hector is a bit ridiculous. I mean, Hector versus Paris, yeah, I mean, it's blindly obvious who Prime is going to favor and who all of Troy is going to favor, but such a stupid system even in Troy. But at least there it felt meaningful. And you're not using gimmicks, because right now with the supporter system, you just then go with Ursus, and you get 5 supporters when you occupy a settlement. And that's basically it. Take settlements, take a lot of territory. It's very slow, and because your long campaign your victory conditions require you to take settlements, yeah, no shock, no surprise, you're actually going to end up achieving every other objective of your long campaign victory condition long before you even complete your short campaign victory condition. And this is important. You know that hero capacity situation that I mentioned about Kislev? Yeah, your short campaign victory condition gives you free hero capacity to all heroes. This is why Ostankia and Borsersus are the much better campaigns, especially Borsersus, because he also gets dash, so all Ostankia has better debuffs, he gets a much better economy, which is important. And also he starts close enough to Kislev to make it work. And he has various choices in the campaign. So this campaign, like, I guess for a very long 100+ turn campaign, it's okay, but most people, the vast majority of the player base, does not play campaigns of 100 turns. It's between 60 and 80 turns, according to Creative Assembly, including to data I have. Like, I did a poll on this, and yeah, most people play within 60 to 100 turns, so roughly 80 turns. That's when people stop. A Kislev campaign in 80 turns, it's just not really worth playing, unless you're going with Borsersus, and even then, not really all that great. I guess it could be fun from the fact that you're fighting a lot of opponents, and you do have a good army, tier 1, tier 2 army, armor Kossars, regular Kossars, Akshinas right now, War Sluts, all that. That's fun. You lack siege, but still, you won't be building a massive empire. It just feels, but it doesn't feel like say a Wood Elf campaign, because a Wood Elf campaign, say what you will about it, a Wood Elf campaign is at least about protecting the woods. Good or bad, good pacing or bad pacing in that respect, but at least it works in that function. Kislev's campaign, you can't play passively, because if you do that, you're just going to flat out run out of money. regardless of the fact that leaving the territory under your opponent's control for them to build up and become a major threat is a bad idea in itself, but still. And yeah, the climate situation, Norska is a pain. Yes, they put in a fix that, oh, you get to command us. You're losing the benefits of a lot of control, recruitment cost, income from old buildings, or maybe even hero recruit rank +2, the very limited heroes. Though I think the hero recruit rank for Kislev is meaningless because you have so few heroes. Hero recruit rank matters when you have a lot of heroes in a campaign. You don't have that as Kislev, and there's the issue that you're going to be dealing with when you are playing a campaign as them. You are playing a fairly limited campaign in a map that doesn't really support that, as a race that doesn't work well with that playstyle. And thematically, it's silly because it's outside of like the supporters, and Invocation is just better to conquer the entire empire. Oh yeah, you can just focus on Festus and Vlad and Azag and Dryka, fair enough. But it's like you're just conquering a significant portion of the empire. Hell, the best thing you might do in a campaign as Kislev is to just go on and burn Altdorf to the ground and then rebuild it. It would actually be a much better, like making all of this territory under your control would actually be the better thing to do, as opposed to fighting the forces of chaos. Do the least possible to fight the forces of chaos. Like in one campaign, I was playing as, what was it, Katrin or Protossx, one of those two, regardless. In one campaign, I literally sold Ungrim territory all the way from his territory over here in the World's Edge Mountains all the way to Troll Country, and he just proceeded to conquer all of Norska. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just building a massive empire in the empire. You go on, Ungrim. Go on ahead. God bless you. That's the best That's the best thing you can do a campaign as Kislev. Don't fight the forces of chaos. Sell the territory between you and another faction, and let other factions, including the dwarves, who are not a great faction at the moment, let the dwarves fight Norska. Let the dwarves be the bulwark of the north, the bulwark of civilization, the shield of civilization, as it were. Fighting chaos is meaningless because the territory, like, you already have plenty of issues. And the issue with chaos territory, the chaos wasteland, yes, it's relatively safe if you can take it, but the distances are so great it's going to take you so long to build up over there. Not really that great of a situation. And also you take attrition whenever you move through Chaos Wasteland territory, so even moving an army for this territory is not especially great. Also, on top of that, you can't ignore the Chaos Waste, however, because Boris Ursus starts there, and you want to confederate him because he's a powerful lord, so you have to end up doing both things at the same time. It is doable, you have the armies to do so, no problem. Like over here I have 6 armies, that's pretty reasonable. Well, more like 5 full armies than a 6th one that's just being built on Gotrek and Felix to go beat up Wulfric over here. And it's annoying dealing with this situation. Like, you might be wondering why Krakadrach has been running away from Wulfric. It's not because they lost, so to speak, or they couldn't defeat him in a straight-up battle. Like, if this army showed up against this army in a straight-up manual battle, they'd win. Faction potential, that's why. That's why the dwarves are running away instead of concentrating 2 full stack against Wulfric and beating the crap out of him. Who, by the way, Wulfric's been marching from my territory to do so. And then he's like, oh, wait, I should declare war on Kislev. I had beaten him previously and then got the peace agreement. That's why. Still, a really bad campaign that doesn't make sense from a thematic standpoint, which is a downside, really. You play a Greenskin campaign for the most part, they make thematic sense. You play a Vampire Count campaign, you play a High Elf campaign, you play a Dark Elf campaign. Hell, you even play a Lizardman campaign, they make sense. Kislev doesn't make sense from a thematic standpoint, because the best thing you can do in a campaign is, yeah, don't be Kislev. Essentially, like, you're basically playing the discount empire. Truth be told, you are probably better than empire. They have a better economy, you have better units. It's like, can we combine the two and have a superior campaign experience? Because, yeah, the empire is pretty awful as well. But yes, economy, campaign dynamics, terrain of Kislev, special cities of Kislev being honestly lackluster. Yes, there's a lot of landmarks, so you do give a shit about them because those landmarks are incredibly powerful. Like, construction costs for ports? Yes, please. Hero capacity? Yes, please. All these things are useful, but You do care about the cities, but the rest of Kislev you can care less. Like in this campaign, yes, I've taken the entire territory of Kislev, but most of the time you could care less about Troll Country or the Eastern Oblast. In fact, it might just be best to sell every bit of Kislev territory to other better factions, so they are the bulwark of the North and you're just the conqueror of the Empire. I mean, you are the ever-chosen, the real ever-chosen. Oh, jeez. Kislev. What a joke. And this was the biggest disappointment for me personally, which has a change, because these things have not been known since Immortal Empires came out. These are not new ideas that I'm expressing here, especially on the economic standpoint or the supporter system. These things have been known since day one with Kislev, and yet Creative Assembly for 2 years have done absolutely nothing to fix this, except we tweak a couple of numbers, we remove devotion costs because we're adding a stanka. That's all. They have done absolutely nothing to fix this problem, these issues. And they are issues that make these like, it would be fun playing a campaign where you're up against, with your back against the wall fighting a lot of Legendary Lords. But the actual playstyle of it doesn't feel quite as exciting as I'm making it out to be. Also, any campaign where you are seeking a fight against Draika is madness. By the way you play a Kislev campaign is you abuse the fact that these factions are fighting each other. So Draika fights Azak, she gets up weakened, you take advantage of that, you take the Griffinwood, you eliminate her recruitment, you resolve her army, essentially. And that's how you win against Draika. Or Vlad, he fights the Empire, you take advantage of that, because in a straight-up fight, he might beat the crap out of you. But you take advantage of his constant fighting with the Empire to obliterate him and end up on top. Yeah. Costin, signing out. Stay tuned for more.